Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Organization Panel 3, Day 2. So we're continuing the organization panel from yesterday. My name is Jesus Pantel. I'm the Cultural Funding Supervisor with the City of Austin Economic Development Department's Cultural Arts Division. We have Maya Williams-Britton here from the Cultural Arts Division running slides for us, as well as Rachel Osgood from the Long Center providing tech support. We also have an outside facilitator, Surabi Kuke. I'm sorry, I was trying to remember off my memory. She is making sure that both myself and the panelists are keeping equity front and center and in mind in our new pilot programs here for Elevate. So again, we're doing Organization Panel 3. So this is nonprofit organizations with budgets under $43,000. The panelists have reviewed all of the applications prior to today and have tentatively made comments and scored on them. They may change their scores during this session depending on feedback from their fellow panelists, but they're not required to do so. We will finalize each score as we finish reviewing an application, getting what their final score is, and then entering that into portal either today or at the end of each application or later in the day if they need to. But will have all of their scores finalized before we move on to a next application. We have a 10-minute maximum time for each application. I will be timing that. If we have any kind of technical difficulties, I will pause the timer so that way you get the full 10 minutes allotted for your review. If we do come down to close to that 10 minutes, I'll give a 3-minute warning, a 2-minute warning, a 1-minute warning, a 30-second warning, and then I'll count down from 10 seconds. And if we reach the end of the time, then we will just stop review with whatever was being said at the end of that 10 minutes. We are asking the panelists not to repeat comments that have already been stated, so just to provide new comments, or if something was previously stated, but they had additional details that one of the previous panelists had not stated, then they can go ahead and do that. We're also not scoring on consensus, so panelists can have different takes on the application. The panelists aren't trying to convince other panelists to, come to their score, but if they have firsthand knowledge or are familiar with an applicant, they can provide that knowledge to, potentially have a panelist change their score, but again, they're not required to do so. Panelists are not announcing a numeric score. They're just providing overall application comments. And those comments should align with the review criteria. We've also asked them to provide constructive criticism for feedback for future improvement as it relates to the review criteria. And the panelists should not base scores on information that is not listed in the scoring rubric, again, other than if they have firsthand knowledge of the applicant, they've gone and seen the work, they're familiar with the applicant, or they went to visit the applicant's website. They were not required to do so unless that was part of your work samples. But if they wanted to do that, they could go ahead and do that. We have asked the panelists to look beyond grantsmanship to the extent possible. So if they had to hunt for the information, but it was there, it's fine for them to make a comment on that. But if it was there, then they should utilize that information, even if it was in a different section, in informing how they score the application. And that is what I have before we get started. So the timer will start when the primary starts giving their commentary. And our first application up for review today is Texas Music Museum, Inc. Lee and Richard are our primary and secondary. And Lee, whenever you're ready to get started.
Okay, good morning. Let me just make sure I have all my little various tabs ordered here. So the Texas Music Museum, they are a museum and they are focused specifically on Texas music, collecting and preserving artifacts, documents, and reference materials around Texas musical traditions. They say of all genres, but they emphasize in their application African-American, Mexican-American, musicians and groups from East Austin. It sounds like they, present work at their own location as well as out in the community at various locations. And overall, I thought this was a pretty compelling application. I thought that they seem to have, they said they have 30 plus years of experience doing this work, and seem to have some roots in Austin, as well as specifically in African American and Mexican American communities. And that's also reflected in their description on their cultural, on the question about leadership and cultural leadership. And they actually seem to have quite a diversity of other marginalized identities represented on their like leadership board, which I appreciated. I noticed that they don't necessarily have strong disability programming now, but they do have some partnerships with with other organizations that work with disabled folks. So it seemed like that was an area that they were acknowledging needed some growth and we're attending to. And equally, they are doing bilingual tours and have plans in their description of their programmatic reach. They have some plans to expand their marketing to underserved communities. Yeah, so those were kind of the main highlights. The one thing that kind of stood out to me, or the two things that stood out to me, is that there were reflections on intersectionality. I felt like just maybe were reflective of them not having, maybe this is just like not language that they use very much, but it sounds like their work is happening across intersectional lines. I just don't know that they're reflecting on it in that way, which can have, could have some limitations to how the work is then implemented. And I didn't see the money that they have listed for artists in their budget. I thought was a little bit like low relative to where they were distributing the rest of their funds, but that was kind of a minor detail. Yeah, Richard.
Okay, so the Texas Music Museum, this is very near and dear to my heart. I played in bands when Austin was more vibrant down at 6th Street than Bourbon Street. I was the one who, as a City of Austin Music Commissioner, helped make the brand of Austin in the live music capital world. They want a building. Point being, it's a museum, it's a building. Austin, if you've lived here, and as I have and played music here for 30 years, you want the Texas Music Museum here. It needs to have a building. It needs to be here. It will typify what Austin is about. And so it is very, very important that it is here, not in Houston, not in Dallas, not in Amarillo. It has to be here. So if y'all live in Austin and have lived in Austin, you're going to want that. It will be a tribute to what Austin is as far as the live music capital of the world. As far as intersectionality and inclusion, it's music. It always has. Playing in all those bands, it was always across the lines. It didn't matter. Everyone was there, whether you're on the band or the audience. So music transcends that no matter what. So as far as they and representing, it's Texas Music Museum. We represent everything. So in that regards, this is very important to the city of Austin, to the music, and to the cultural arts.
Any other thoughts or reflections on this?
I'll add, because I've collaborated with this entity a few times over the years and known their work. Kind of echoing Richard's comments, I scored this application high. I think I know the director works tirelessly to represent specifically smaller genres of music. A lot of blues, but a lot of conjunto and things that tourists may not know about when they come to Texas. So they used to have a space, and I think they lost it a few years ago. So again, echoing what Richard said, that it's really important for locals and tourists. and I started in blues research is how I started my career in Austin in the arts, and I've learned so many things seeing their exhibits and their events. They really lift up artists that are not given the chance to be showcased very often, both in historic in exhibitions that they do and performances.
Thank you. Taylor, I see your hand too.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I think this is a really great sort of archival project for just like Sarah was saying, kind of the history of music in Austin. My one suggestion, it kind of revolves around opportunity creation. They mention a lot about internship programs, specifically working with UT Austin. I would encourage them to kind of expand that reach and include opportunities and internship opportunities for people who might not be within a university institution, to better help reach some of the key constituents and sort of those who have history with the genres of music that they're interested in showcasing.
Great suggestion. Any other feedback for this application?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I've only interacted with the organization about 20 years ago, but when reading the application, I was like, oh, it's led by one person, and who has obviously created an incredible amount of work. And so I just would like the board and leadership to think about succession and bringing more people to the table now to preserve this beautiful archive, so it is around for another 100 years, because that's a lot of weight to carry on the few people that are driving it forward.
Great guidance, thank you. Other thoughts, reflections on this application? Things we haven't heard?
We've got just over 2 minutes left while panelists are thinking if they have any additional information that has not already been stated. Just a reminder, both for the applicants and the panelists, that we are asking the panelists to give constructive criticism as it relates to the review criteria. And then for the building itself, while the Elevate application is a general operating support, utilizing funds, for purchasing a space is itself not allowable, but rent and stuff like that is. Looking at their budget, they do have space in the cash column, so they're not using the city awards about that. But just so we're clear on that when we're considering our scores. Just over a minute left. Any additional comments from the panel that have not already been stated? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sarah, Vale, Taylor, Emily and Richard, and Lee. Okay, next application up for review is Austin New Music Co-op. Sarah and Emily are our primary and secondary. And Sarah, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, Austin New Music Co-op is requesting funding for 3 concerts coming up in their season this year. Founded in 2002, mission to support community of composers, performers, and listeners in Austin by increasing awareness and understanding of new music. On this application, I felt like they lacked evidence of serving the communities that are at risk for cultural erasure or marginalization that Elevate is focusing on. They did speak on intersectionality and accessibility, but overall I took points off because, again, they lacked, at least in their application, they lacked evidence of serving diverse groups and inclusion, especially via marketing, outreach, and engagement.
Some of the comments that I had were, I appreciate the non-hierarchical approach to their programming and decision making, but I want to know who's on their board, what communities the people on their board are from, and what different artistic disciplines that they represent. The same goes for the members and artists participating in the programming. So that just also makes me question, like, is this application in alignment with the Elevate grant? You know, it mentions on intersectionality that they're presenting work by women and seeking new voices, but who are they partnering with? So we know that they're a unique music organization that's disrupting the status quo within presenting this music. And I think, you know, they're saying that they're programming diverse voices, but I don't see that, you know, like, I would love to see them partner with different organizations to reach stakeholders and perhaps work together in building a diverse audience. But yeah, I mean, the work, where is my Zoom? I'm so sorry, notes. You know, the work is good. I just don't know if it's in alignment with the Elevate goals.
Any additional comments from other panelists that is not repeating what has already been stated by the primary or secondary? If there are no additional comments, if you would please, oh, I did want to state as a reminder, there was a comment on the communities of the board. Just a reminder for the panelists, and so the applicant knows, there was in the application form information on board demographics that the applicant provided that is visible only to Economic Development Department and Cultural Arts Division staff as part of our data collection efforts. So I'm not sure if that's what the comment was on. And I don't want to speak for the applicant because we do ask in the question for them to list their communities. But just want to make sure that we're aware of that, since we aren't scoring on immutable characteristics. So with that being said, just keep that in mind with your scores for this application. Any final comments from the panel? If there are none, please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Lee, Vale, everyone. Emily, your camera's off, so I can't see if you're giving a thumbs up or not.
Oh, one sec.
Sure.
Sorry, here I am.
Okay, and a thumbs up. All right, so we are finished with the review of that application. We will move on to Dance Waterloo. Emily and Sarah are our primary and secondary. And Emily, whenever you're ready to begin.
Give me just 1 second to pull up my notes. I'm so sorry.
No problem. And just a reminder that the 10-minute timer will not start until the primary starts giving their commentary.
Okay. And sorry about this. Dance Waterloo is requesting funding in its efforts to expand and improve organizational operations for upcoming project support. Their funds will be invested in an administrative team and its efforts, providing competitive pay and more opportunities to help them invest thoughtfully into the community. And also applying funds to increase organizational accessibility efforts. For my notes, I really, sorry, my computer's. Sarah, would you be able to continue while my notes are popping up?
Sure, no problem.
Yeah.
I have familiarity with this organization, both as a former dancer and I've attended their events. So yeah, again, as Emily said, they're requesting funds for both operations and programmatic support, with the goal of expanding. And I appreciate that because, again, as a former dancer, often the performance opportunities are completely unpaid. They are paying their dancers, paying some support staff. So I gave them a fairly high score on this application. Again, because I've seen their work in the community and experienced it, and they utilize somewhat unconventional spaces, at least to the dance world, unconventional, meaning not theaters or those sorts of structures and venues. They're more accessible in their choice of venues, and they perform a lot outdoors, which is fun to experience, I guess. And also, like, during COVID, I went, to one of them as it was getting safer, it felt safer to be outside. So just a couple notes about their work. And the only notes I have on this application are just a couple pieces of information that I thought they could get into a little more on tourism, outreach in that area. And I would have liked to see a little bit more details in the marketing plan, since it was more getting into their goals for expansion and how the programming has been to diverse audiences. But that's the notes I have for feedback.
So my notes are here. I appreciated, I don't have experience with this organization. I thought the application really gave me a window into their work. I love this line, keeping dance behind, instead of keeping dance behind closed doors with high ticket prices, they take it outside into beautiful public spaces. It's obvious, it seems that this organization's at a turning point for growth, and this funding will help build the infrastructure for what they want to accomplish. The organization is women-led. They seek to work collectively to include dancers in decision-making process as well. Just by digging around on their website, I'd like to see more representation of women of color. They started a choreographic fellows program. It seems like the organization's really listening into responding community needs. They have longstanding partnerships with public parks, and they work consistently with artists in different disciplines, which is creating interesting collaborations. But yeah, I mean, overall, a strong application. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Sorry. Any other reflections? Yeah, go ahead. I see Sarah Vale, and I see Taylor.
I was just gonna say, from my perspective, I would have liked to see a much stronger emphasis on serving communities that are at risk of cultural erasure and displacement, or that have experienced other forms of institutional marginalization. I think it was mentioned that they work to collaborate with BIPOC and LGBTQ artists, but I didn't see that throughout the entire application, and I didn't see a lot of concrete examples that really hit it home for me that this is a real priority for this organization. So I wish that had been a bit more explicit, because from my perspective, I wasn't sure that this was the right fit for the priorities of this grants program.
Taylor?
Yeah, I really appreciate sort of the community nature of dance that they're trying to bring into this field. My suggestion for them, since it sounds like, community engagement is something that they are looking to do now that they are expanding their practice, I noticed a lot of the parks that they work with, Peace Park, Waterloo Park, Wildflower Center, are situated in predominantly white neighborhoods. So maybe expanding their outreach to public parks in South Austin, East Austin, where they have better access to the constituencies that they see themselves serving. I would have liked to see a little bit more emphasis on bringing in dancers from those communities, as well as instructors for those communities, so that they, have a kind of closer interaction at the leadership level. I know they mentioned that they do have some, but I think I needed a little bit more of a breakdown. It seemed kind of very general. And then my only other sort of critique is, it seems like at the moment, the only kind of way they are serving their the kind of constituency of those who experience institutional marginalization and or cultural erasure and displacement is through donations from classes, if I read that right. So I think they've managed to donate a lot of their sales and revenue into some really great organizations here in Austin, and I think that's really, really great. But I would like to see a little bit more of that happening in the creative direction of this project, and less about just kind of, the sort of charity aspect of it, but really kind of how are they driving the creative direction in this project. So
Awesome. A few more minutes. Lee, go ahead.
I hope and think this isn't an exact replication of something that was just said, but kind of particularly for me, it was like the specificity that I was hoping for more of when they were talking about both the communities that are at risk of displacement or cultural erasure, and like how they work with them. So when I was reading BIPOC and LGBT members of there are BIPOC and LGBT members on their cultural leadership team, that felt super vague, and so I was hoping to get just more. I think this was somewhat said in other ways, but like examples, specificity, so that I could have that clear picture of how that all comes together in their work.
There's still time if you have thoughts that have reflections that haven't been stated already or shared. Okay.
While you're thinking, that if you have any additional comments that have not already been stated by other panelists, just a reminder, there was a comment about seeing women of color or not seeing women of color on the website, and just a reminder that, you can't necessarily tell someone's race or ethnicity just by, looking at pictures or how they appear. So just keep that in mind. Any additional comments or from the panel that have not already been stated? If not, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sarah, Lee, Vale, Emily. Taylor. And Richard. All right, so next application up for review is Austin Baroque Orchestra. Lee and Sarah are our primary and secondary. And Lee, whenever you're ready to begin.
Great. So Austin Baroque Orchestra and Chorus is an ensemble that performs music from the 1600 to 1800s. And they're kind of sharing that across Central Texas, including Austin, with a particular focus on Latin America and Iberia. And I thought that they're doing really interesting work and kind of an exciting work project to kind of keep a certain era of music alive and share that. My general critiques across the board were just that it was not clear to me that the work centered communities that were at risk of displacement. and that felt especially like it really stood out, given that they are working in a musical genre rooted in Latin American culture, or Latin America. I was surprised not to see more specific and overt collaboration with like Latin American populations in Austin, or historic Latin American or Latino organizations. They also don't yet have much work around serving non-English speaking audiences, including Spanish speaking audiences, which again, just to me feels like there was some mention of it, so that there seems to be an awareness that there's area for growth, which I think is great. And for the purposes of this application or this particular grant, I feel like the goals are really to resource organizations that have already taken some steps towards that work, and have a really clear outline, at least in their proposal, for how they would move forward in that direction, which I also didn't see. So those are my reflections for this group.
Thank you, Lee. Secondary, Sarah?
Yeah, and I just have to add in my notes that the specific areas that I deducted points or gave low scores on were intersectionality and accessibility, due to the reasons that Lee just laid out. So yeah, I felt like I would just be repeating what she said.
Okay, any other, go ahead, Vale.
And I'm sorry, I feel like maybe Lee touched on this because I was distracted for a second, but a super big thing that stood out to me with this application is I noticed that there was talk about hiring a cultural consultant, which I think is a really nice idea, but then I didn't see that reflected in the budget at all. And so, just encouraging to this organization that if that is something that they're looking into, to be sure that they're compensating someone fairly for that work and for the time that they're taking.
Thank you. Other reflections on this? Thoughts that have not been stated yet, maybe? Go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah, I also struggled a little bit with this application. I felt like some of a lot of the fears of kind of tokenism around the content were very strong, especially in the sort of community voice. But it's very interesting because the applicant almost answers their own questions around tokenism, but it still does not really get to the root of proper inclusion of constituents that have culture in the content that they want to share. So it was really interesting, and I guess I would just invite this applicant to be a little bit more reflective of their goals when it comes to working with these communities, and understanding that there might be this really grandiose idea that has a lot of great intention, but until you really have that kind of community relationship, you're not going to know exactly what it is that the community is interested in or interested in hearing. So kind of a lot of kind of putting the cart before the horse, if you will, when it comes to that community engagement. So yeah, so just being really mindful of language as it relates to intention, which I know is hard to do, especially in sort of a grant writing kind of facility. But yeah, that was my biggest note. So it was kind of hard to get those kind of undertones out of this particular application.
Okay. Inviting other feedback on this application for the applicant or reflections on the application itself.
If there are no further comments, and a reminder, we are asking panelists not to repeat comments that have already been stated. Seeing as there are no further comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Taylor, Vale, Sarah and Lee, Richard and Emily. Okay, next application up for review is Folklore y Ritmos de Panama. Rogelio McInnes, President. Vale and Richard are our primary and secondary. And Vale, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. Folklore y Ritmos de Panama brings Panamanian and Latin American culture to Austin. They collaborate with local dance troupes and cultural organizations to enrich the community's landscape. I thought this was a really strong application. They very clearly identified that their key constituencies were the greater Latinx community. The leadership appears to have a deeply rooted cultural understanding and lived experience within that community. I did think that the cultural activities section of the application could have used just a bit more detail in like fleshing out what activities they want to do with this funding. But I found more evidence of that in other sections of the application. So I think that's just kind of my advice to the applicant is to maybe concentrate more of that information in the section that asked for it. But I also really appreciated their marketing plan and that the proposed budget really focused on widening their audience and bringing more people into their activities.
Thank you, Vale. Before we move on to secondary, just for the applicant, if they're watching live or the recording later, Sarah did let us know that occasionally she may have to go off camera, so she is still participating in the panel. With that being said, secondary, Richard? And you are muted, Richard, so we pause the recording for just a second. And we will restart once Richard starts giving his commentary. I said recording, I meant the timer. We've stopped the timer for, so the application gets a full 10 minutes allotted once Richard starts giving his commentary.
Sorry, I got so many windows open trying to go from this note to that note. Let me go back to my notes. Not that window. So yeah, the cultural ambassadors representing, Colombia, Venezuela, Cuba, Chile, Peru, Mexico, Nicaragua. They promote the dance and the theater. That's very important to push those cultural dance. It's necessary. We need to know what's going on out there artistically in the world here in Austin. So there's a solid commitment there. They have a board of 6 and Martha has been there for 30 years. So it shows some experience. I'd like to see a little more diversity there just to, have that, add that dimension. Otherwise, I think it's a solid program. It just needs a little more. Oh, one of the things is I wish they would show more of their history, some of the dances that they have done through all these years, so we can see the impact that they've had. That's one of the things I wish they would have done more, is to show the impact they have had promoting their culture and that dance. When I went to the website, I just wish I wanted to see that, so I wish they would push that more.
Okay. Any other panelists want to provide feedback on this application?
If there are no additional comments that have not already been stated by the primary or the secondary, seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Lee, Taylor, Richard, Vale, Sarah, and Emily. All right, next application up for review is Epistrophe Arts. Emily and Taylor are our primary and secondary. And Emily, whenever you're ready to begin.
Or one sec. Epistrophe Arts is seeking funding for their music series. They present jazz music and experimental contemporary music. When I lived in Austin, I really enjoyed their concerts. They have a really exciting season ahead, an all-female ensemble consisting of some really fantastic players, ensemble from Columbia, and William Parker, Gerald Cleaver Trio. I just want to personally say that one of the thing that I really appreciate about this organization is in the performing arts ecosystem, a lot of times presenters do not take risk on jazz artists. And so it was really a pleasure when I lived in the city that this is where I got to see the majority of music and music by Black artists. And especially, and I used to, I think Victory Grill, they had a lot of concerts there, if I remember. So it was just really, I really enjoyed experience that organization firsthand. With the application, I really like that they're bringing concerts to young people. They're partnering with a bunch of organizations for their concert series. And let me just see, what is another note? Their budget will go to pay for artist fees and honorarium. And what is their other, I'm sorry, I'm looking at all of this. I think in terms of cultural relevance, I would have liked them to expand more in the app of how they're engaging with diverse communities that reflect that programming. I think that's it from me.
Thank you, Emily. Secondary, Taylor?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed learning about epistrophe arts, if I can say that word right. And I can tell based on sort of the external research and the supplemental materials that they have a really strong history here in Austin, which I really appreciate, and that they are really sticking true to their grassroots nature. I did struggle without knowing the organization, just reading their application. I wanted just more emphasis on how their key constituency, is whatever it is. I felt like it came off very general for all musicians, for everybody interested in jazz music. And when I did kind of the extra research, I realized, okay, actually, this is a community of people who do experience cultural erasure and displacement. And I think that their mission is definitely to keep that culture alive. Through the musicians that they work with. I just didn't really see that as exemplified in the responses. I also I noticed that there's like a lot of focus on international artists that they're bringing in, and a lot of kind of funds going to hosting that. And I want to be cognizant of paying local artists and recognizing that there are opportunities to fund local artists here as well, for this particular funding source. I also thought that the intersectionality response was kind of a little skirted around, and I would like to them been a little bit more intentional about how they're incorporating that, especially as they start to receive funding, grow a little bit more. Kind of how are you going to be using these resources to be a little bit more intentional? As it seems like you've been doing really great work since now, and now it's kind of like how do you elevate a little bit more? How do you be a little bit more intentional now that if you want to receive funds of this nature? But all in all, really exciting to see kind of like the heart and spirit of live music in Austin and in this grassroots way.
Excellent. Any other reflections, thoughts, feedback for the applicant that hasn't already been stated?
Well, panelists are thinking if there's additional information to add that has not already been stated by one of the primary or secondary. I want to note that it is fine for applicants to have outside artists or international artists, but to the comment that was made, one of the priorities listed in our guidelines is, oh, and I just had it and it went away, but that priority was given to local artists. So just maybe for future improvement, just making that clear. And again, staff has not reviewed these in depth, but just laying that out there, that it is fine to have outside artists, but a priority is funding for local artists. With that being said, any additional comments from other panelists? If there are no additional comments from the panel, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Taylor, Lee, Emily, Vale, Emily, Sarah, sorry. And Richard. All right, and we are just about on schedule, so we will stop the recording for our first break. So we are reconvening after our break, the Elevate Organization Panel 3. Our next application up for review is Austin Tejano Music Coalition. Richard and Sarah are our primary and secondary. And Richard, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, panelists, first I want to apologize because yesterday I got these organizations mixed up. So this time I hopefully have it correct. If not, Jesus, throw a brick at me. So overall comments. The Tejano Music Coalition, it has a great mission and goals, but I just didn't see any demonstrable evidence of professional execution. It has, see, let me go down to my notes. Its flagship programs of Tejano Idol and Brown Santa. Those are its flagship according to the application. I wanted a reference on the web, but their web is under construction. Brown Santa Toy Drive is not applicable in this arena. I looked all over for the Tejano Idol because that is such a great idea. And if it originated in Austin, as they said, it's been done for 7 years, but I haven't seen anything since 2019, and I hunted everywhere. The only thing I found was a Facebook post that was 9-second silent video with a poster of an October 22 vibes party. So, I wish they would demonstrate what they claim to do as far as their intersectionality and inclusion. They're a Tejano group, therefore that is who their audience is. That is what is inherent in their mission, so it's not really as germane. I just wish I would have seen clear demonstration of their mission and what they have done. So I was underwhelmed. And that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Richard. Secondary, Sarah?
Okay, I was trying to pull back up the application to see if, because I couldn't remember what their attachments, but it's not coming up. So I'll just go off my notes for how I scored them. Yeah, they do work hard in the community. There are not many nonprofit organizations in Austin or really in Texas that are trying to preserve Tejano music. And it is music that's at risk for cultural erasure, as well as conjunto, which is a similar genre in origin. And so I have some knowledge of this organization and have worked alongside them in a couple of efforts, not officially with them though. And so I'm aware of the Tejano Idol and I couldn't pull up something to to contest Richard's notes, but I'm aware of the program, so it does exist, and it's supported in that community. So overall, I gave them a fairly high score, but I do agree that the application is definitely lacking details, specifically in intersectionality and community voice. They have deep roots in the Tejano community and have been around in Austin, and have a followership, but the application just, again, as Richard said, didn't give a lot of examples of that, and so that some of the answers were unclear. And there was just, this is more for the panelists, there was like accidental copy and paste of an answer near the end of the application under budget, so which left some financial details lacking, in my opinion. So again, I actually scored them fairly high because of their work in marginalized communities in Austin, but agree that there was some application, there's some feedback, there's some room for growth in the application.
Thanks. Lee, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I appreciated their like work samples that they included, which were print flyers from some of their previous performances, which both kind of gave a sense of like their audience and what they've been up to. And one of these goes back as far as 2017, so kind of over a period of time as well. But also because some of these have been in partnership, and I imagine they may have included some of these because it lists some of the partners or sponsors from the community, with a wide range of folks from like HEB to like more like local restaurants. And so I feel like even just in their work samples, that long-standing relationship in community was demonstrated. And I feel like this for me serves as a good alternative to a like robust website. If this is where their community is, like if this is how their community engages, then perfect. A flyer seems great to me, more than necessarily other types of online representation.
Thank you.
Can I piggyback, because I was able to pull up on our portal, just to add on to Lee's comments, and I work a lot with Tejano and Conjunto music, and a lot of the fan base is on Facebook, so that's like Lee said, it's not necessary to have a website necessarily in these communities, these music communities. So and the work samples show every year of the Tejano Audio, and it's possible they have not done one since COVID. And in the, at least from my work in Conjunto music, some of the people I work with were extra careful during COVID because there's a lot of seniors that come to these events, and a lot of people with pre-existing conditions. So that may be why there's not 2020 through 2023 up yet.
Oh, I was just going to back up what Sarah said, because in the actual budget attachment, they made a note of how COVID has slowed down their productions. So I think that's really supported by the evidence they give us.
Thank you. I really do want to lift up this equitable analysis, and noticing, meeting people exactly where they are and with what they're offering. Any other thoughts, Taylor or Emily? I don't know if you wanted to add on at the moment. No. Okay.
If there are no further additional comments that have not already been stated by any of the panelists, again, we're not asking for repetition, but just any new comments. If you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. And while panelists are doing that, and it looks like everybody's done. So just the comment that was made earlier, some applications do have similar names. We have advised if, you know, one of the panelists did say that they had mixed it up with the previous organization, so they have been advised to just go back and double check their scores for that application, make sure that the commentary is correct. And we do have the application ID numbers along with the name, so that way if they do have similar names, we have a couple of organizations with Tejano in their name, couple with Deaf in their name. So just making sure we're looking at the application ID number to make sure that those are correct. So all scores have been finalized on Austin Tejano Music Coalition. So we are moving on to Austin Chamber Ensemble. This is another one. I can't remember if they were in this panel or not, but there are a couple of chamber music groups in Austin. So just be sure you are looking at the correct one here. Austin Chamber Ensemble 061367-TM2N2, M like Mary, N like Nancy. Austin Chamber Ensemble, Sarah and Taylor are our primary and secondary. And Sarah, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, I hope I can read my own notes on this one because it's handwritten. They are requesting funding for 2 concerts upcoming, and they present creative programming, performing new works, artist exchanges, and educational presentations, according to their application, founded in the early 80s. So on this application, I guess I could say I scored them kind of mid-range, and the areas for improvement in my notes that I did not give the highest score on these specific answers were leadership. They mention basically allyship, which is appreciated, but it's not relevant per se to what this grant is looking for. And then intersectionality was a somewhat vague answer, so no proof in my opinion there. And then I have a note that under the programming question near the end of the application doesn't list much marketing details, but that is included in the budget. So those are the notes I have on this applicant.
Thank you, Sarah. Secondary, Taylor?
Yeah, I have similar notes to Sarah. I think that this was kind of one of those applications where they are sort of evolving. I mean, they mentioned it also, you know, they were founded in the mid 80s and Austin looked a lot different. So I can see that they are attempting to evolve their mission to kind of be in line with the diversity of Austin today, which I appreciate. I kind of scored them a little bit higher in intersectionality and inclusion just by nature of them being explicit about the musicians that they're hiring and working with and the types of music and by, you know, diverse composers that they're looking to play, although they might not have had the best sort of response or the most clearest response. I think that the nature of this proposal kind of can insinuate that that's where they're at least attempting to head. But I also would have liked to see a little bit more reflection in that trajectory in their cultural leadership and sort of the higher levels of you know, creative direction that they have. And I also, you know, they scored pretty low for me with community voice. I think it was kind of mentioned that certain voices were included, but without really describing how and, you know, what tactics they use to include the voices and sort of analyze the feedback that they get. So.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else with reflections on this proposal, this application rather? Go ahead, Vale.
Yeah, I think I also just had like a little bit of a concern about maybe some tokenizing that might be happening with this application. I think I remember there being like a big focus on marketing to BIPOC communities specifically for their Black History Month concert. And I would love to see, you know, a greater focus throughout their concert programming in reaching these audiences and like amplifying these voices.
Thank you. We have more time for folks if you have thoughts you want to share that have not been stated already.
Looking around to see if panelists have any additional comments, seeing as there are none. If you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Lee, Richard, Taylor, Vale, Sarah, and Emily. All right, next application up for review is Russian Speaker Society of Austin. Richard and Sarah are our primary and secondary. And Richard, whenever you're ready to begin.
Overall comments, the Russian and Eastern European Culture and Arts Ambassador Group. They're going to put on 5 productions, which music production, opera, jazz, classical, I forgot the others, but basically every city needs one. So this is ours. So it's a solid organization. They're branching out to Eastern European and Asian community, which is good. History of service, it's impressive, 30 years. They got an impressive group on the board. They are the cultural, like I said, cultural voice of Russian arts and culture. And they're the contact point for Russian tourists, which, you know, during these days is something we need with Russia and Ukraine and the headlines. And having Russia arts as being their focus is way better than what we see on the news. As far as intersectionality and inclusion, it's Russian art. So it's within that culture. It's just inherent in their mission. They work with the UT Russian Center, which is always good. Having a collaboration with UT is always good. That helps its branch out. So all in all, I just thought it was a solid organization and application. And so that's my take.
Thank you, Richard. Secondary, Sarah?
Yes, I think I agree they're doing great work and this is a good application and would say the same thing that Richard said about the outreach to Russian communities, except with the note that I'm just unsure of the commitment to equity outside of those main cultures that they represent, to other marginalized communities within Austin, looking at Austin's breakdown. So I feel like and then one area for improvement, I feel like they addressed accessibility and answered the question well, but that they could work to start marketing to other languages that are prevalent in Austin, including Spanish and ASL. Obviously their programming is in languages besides English, but that was my only note for improvement.
Other panelists have feedback on this application.
A reminder that we are asking panelists not to repeat comments that have already been stated, but just to provide any additional information, whether it's expanding on something that has been stated or a different take, as we are not scoring by consensus. Giving a little bit of time for panelists to look through their notes, but if there are no further comments on this application, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Vale and Richard and Taylor and Sarah, Lee and Emily. Okay, next application up for review is Tetractus New Music. Vale and Emily are our primary and secondary, and Vale, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. So Tetractus New Music is looking to produce and expand their program titled Here Be Monsters, which started this past May and was an indie classical music show. They hope to expand it to a 2-day music festival that presents 20 local artists and new music organizations and feature the presentation of 20 newly commissioned works by Austin-based composers. The event will take place in May of 2024 at the Butterfly Bar. I think this is a really interesting proposal. I love the concept of a classical music festival. I think from the information that was provided, it was hard for me to see if this was a good fit for this grants program and its priorities. The key constituencies that were identified in the program were just like the general Austin community and art scene, rather than communities that are specifically at risk of cultural erasure and displacement. There were some past examples provided of diverse composers they've worked with, but all of those examples were international composers outside of the Austin space. So I appreciated how the project summary talked about how local musicians and composers will be highlighted, but I really missed the how of how that's going to happen, and how voices from communities that are at risk of cultural erasure and displacement were being prioritized in that work, and how they're being brought in. I also noticed like there was a comment in the programmatic reach section that talked about potentially like a higher commissioning fee for composers of color, or that are in the LGBTQ community, which I was really interested to see. But the budget showed a flat rate of $1,500 for all the commissions. So I was unsure if there was a disconnect there. I really could have used some more detail and explanation of that idea and how that would work.
Thank you. Secondary, Emily? Oh, and you're muted, Emily.
Okay. Once again, this is a really, it seems that there's a independent classical music scene coming up in Austin, which is exciting, and a scene that wants to commission new work and represent new voices. My only, I appreciate this organization's approach to non-hierarchical leadership with their curation, and their transparency with their curation and leadership. Deep community engagement. They sold 300 tickets to their festival, which is impressive. I'd like to see them build more community relationships with non-community music partners to grow their audience. And I have a note, it says that they are planning to invest into commissioning more BIPOC composers and bring music to marginalized communities. But I don't know the process of how. But I also, like, once again, just trying to, the gray area thing of, is this proposal aligned with this grant? So that's where I was.
Excellent. Okay. Other voices on this application sharing reflections that we have not heard already.
Well, as a published songwriter, a lot of times in this genre, these guys, they don't get the stage that they deserve, or can get, because they're kind of out there. So this type of organization is necessary for that group that's underrepresented, and then also us being the live music capital of the world. So I really appreciate what they're doing.
Other voices?
Looking to see if there are additional comments from the panel. Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Lee, Richard, Vale, Sarah, Emily, and Taylor. All right, next application up for review is Austin Emerging Arts Leaders. Emily and Vale are our primary and secondary. And Emily, whenever you are ready to begin. And you are muted, Emily.
Austin Emerging Arts Leaders cultivates the next. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry about that. EAL cultivates the next generation of arts leaders by developing inclusive systems for growth. In their annual mentorship program, 5 to 7 emerging artists or administrators are paired with established mentors to build relationships that aid their personal, professional, and creative development. EAL provides development workshops and public events with performance or exhibition space to introduce these emerging professionals to the community. I just want to say there's a crisis across the country of incubating new administrative talent to run cultural organizations. And I really appreciate that what this organization has been doing and how they have grown since I've left the community, especially with their mentorship program, because not everyone has money to go get a master's in arts administration. And most of the time it's a fly by the seat of your pants. You learn on the job and you kind of accidentally become a arts administrator. So I really appreciate what this organization has accomplished. And I thought it was an overall strong application. Let me get the app back out. They have solid representation from diverse communities on their board and in their leadership. And let me see one other, I'm trying to get the notes to come up, but could my colleague, the second reader, go while I pull up these other notes?
Sure, I can go. I thought this was a strong application. It was clear that they've evolved. I think they said kind of over the last 3 years to start really prioritizing the BIPOC and LGBTQ communities in their mentorship program. I think where the application could have been a bit stronger is how exactly they're prioritizing those communities. You know, what's their process for ensuring that they're selecting candidates from those communities and lifting them up. I did appreciate that their marketing plan, I think very specifically, showed a focus on reaching out to those communities. So that was helpful to me as I looked at this, but I think just a little bit more of an explicit how would have been helpful.
Okay.
My other comment is that this organization that I put in the app, it's been operating on volunteer labor. And so investment from the city would kind of help the organization sustain itself a little bit more. But the volunteer labor is obviously an expression of the need and desire for this organization to exist and also to change what the leadership looks like in the city for the next generation.
Okay. Other folks want to weigh in? Sarah, go ahead.
I have a lot of knowledge of this organization, and so I'll try not to go too deep and keep it relevant to the application. But shout out to Jesus Pentel for early origins of this as a network of Americans for the Arts, which is a national organization, and also Anne-Marie McCaskill-Davis on staff that basically was the starter. the founder of this organization, and I was a founding board member. So just quick connect the dots on some comments that panelists gave, that this organization was started because there's a lot of networking groups in Austin for a lot of things, and happy hour groups and things, but there weren't for arts administrators. And so it's good to see the growth, that they became a nonprofit organization, and that they're trying to get funds to, I would assume, eventually pay some of their leadership roles. And I think the only chapter of Americans for the Arts Emerging Leaders Network that ever had a paid role was LA, and I'm not sure if that's even around anymore. So this is a very rare organization, and the part of its origin, like how it was founded, what it's giving to the community, and then the success with diversifying their board, diversifying their outreach, specifically through this mentorship program. I cannot speak, I have no conflict of interest anymore. I'm not affiliated directly with them at all anymore, but so I can't speak to their actual process for outreach, but I know that it's a high priority, especially in the mentorship program, to have you know, a wide range of representation in both the mentees and mentors, and that they're both given stipends, which is just nice to know that you're going into something with more than just you know, meeting someone that can help you with your career, but it's slightly compensating your time, because all of these things take a lot of time and effort. I think the only place that I deducted points on this application was under accessibility. It said they're not focusing on language accessibility at this time, but I think just again, because I have knowledge of the organization, they're kind of being humble because they have opportunities to, you know, translate marketing materials and stuff, and it's probably just because they're all volunteers board working that they don't have the time, but I'm kind of reading that into it. And so I took off on that accessibility point, but great work they're doing.
Excellent. Thank you for your insights. Any other reflections? Feedback?
Just over 3 minutes, while panelists are thinking that they have additional comments that have not previously been stated. There were a couple of comments that sounded like they were going to financial need, and a reminder to the panel that financial need is not necessarily a scoring criteria. It would have to tie back directly to the review criteria, but financial need in and of itself, unless it's tied back to that review criteria, is not something that should be scored on. A little over 2.5 minutes left. Any additional comments on this application? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Lee, Sarah, Richard, Taylor, Vale, and Emily. All right, and our next application up for review is Song Rise Arts. Taylor and Vale are our primary and secondary, and Taylor, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, so Song Rise Arts Showcase is a mentorship and songwriting program for youth in Austin, age 14 through 26. They offer programming through trauma-informed songwriting classes, mentorship, and barrier-eliminating support for the creation of new songs that's reflective of Austin's diverse population. Overall, I scored really highly on this project. I thought it was a really great opportunity to use songwriting to connect with youth, especially youth who experience homelessness, especially youth that come out of the foster care system and then into kind of that homeless pipeline. I really appreciated, especially that kind of community voice section where they were kind of routinely taking feedback from the youth that they work with, and therefore kind of adjusted their programming based on that feedback. Some notable things that I remember is not being punitive for missing classes, opening up virtual sessions for all their classes for students that aren't able to attend physically, offering sort of incentives to come to class, $30 per class. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed watching some of these showcases and seeing these students come back as mentors in this program. That tells me that, you know, they're really doing meaningful work that it has a long-lasting effect for the constituents that they serve. Yeah, so I just really enjoyed hearing the testimonials from students, really firsthand experience. I thought their cultural leadership had a diverse board that both understood and had lived experience in the constituency base that they served. Look at my notes here. Yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you, Taylor. Secondary? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Jesus. I was ready to go. I don't have a ton to add. I agree with a lot of the things that Taylor said. I thought this was a really, really strong application. I thought it was just so clear how there's an investment in like long-term benefits for youth from these marginalized communities. I also thought it was really important how they're targeting this like transitional youth period that I think is often like overlooked. So really, really setting up these individuals with tools and resources for success. And I also just like want to say that I think the model of providing the participants with a stipend is like really awesome. So yeah.
Other voices on this application? Sharing thoughts that maybe we haven't heard already.
Well, I have to comment on songwriting. Songwriting is a tough thing to do. Some people start with lyrics, some people start with music, some people need inspiration, some people need desperation. Some only do 1, 3, 4, some do 1, 4, 5, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these guys, I have to tell you, it is tough to do, and I'm just so impressed that they're out there, especially with these two communities. So, you know, as a songwriter, when I saw that, it was like, man, that's impressive. So kudos to you, to Songrise.
Great. Anyone else?
A reminder, we're asking panelists to provide new comments, not repeating any comments that have been said. Any additional comments from the panel? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Taylor, Vale, Sarah, Lee, Richard, and Emily. All right, and that is our last application before lunch, so we will stop the recording. All right, and we are back from lunch for the Elevate Organization Panel 3. I have a couple of announcements I'd like to make. For those of you who are here in the morning, it'll be similar, but basically, the panelists have reviewed all of the applications prior to today and have tentatively scored and commented on them. They can change their scores based on the feedback from the other panelists. We do have a panelist who will had something come up, and so will be gone for a little bit. She will watch the recording for any applications that she missed so she can see the panelists' other comments and make the make any comments or changes to her scores if she'd like. We will send her written comments to the other panelists. She will again watch the recording later to do that. We have a maximum time of 10 minutes per application. I will be timing those, and if we have any technical difficulties, I will stop the timer to make sure that the application gets the full allotted time that it was reviewed or allotted for. And we are not scoring or on consensus, so panelists can have different takes on the applications, and that is fine. So with that being said, we will reconvene or start reviewing our next application now that we're back from lunch. The Austin African American Book Festival. Vale and Lee are our primary and secondary, and the 10-minute timer will start whenever Vale is ready to begin.
Okay, thank you. The Austin African American Book Festival is a cultural and community celebration of African American writers and their work. Their mission is to design and implement thought-provoking and engaging literary-based programming that serves as a catalyst for expanded thinking, activism, and positivity. The 18th installment of the festival is scheduled for June 2024 and will include talks by scholars of color, author and poet readings, and lots of activities for the youth, including an ASL slam poetry event. I thought this was a very strong proposal. I thought it was really aligned with the tenets of this grants program because it's very clearly serving the Black community. I thought also that while at times I think it could be a bit more specifically addressed, I did appreciate their answer around intersectionality and how they are, don't think of the Black community as a monolith, and considering the different intersections of identities that people have, and that goes into consideration when choosing authors and programming discussions and poets and things like that. So I thought this was a really strong proposal that had some clear long-term benefits also for the Black community. And I also really appreciated how after the festival, they also donate a lot of books to a local library to make them available.
Thank you, Vale. Lee?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Vale shared, and overwhelmingly thought this was a really strong proposal. And the only couple of areas that seemed like they could grow to me were one, a little bit of what Vale mentioned was just, I think that some of the their relationship to intersectionality could have just been spelled out more clearly. And additionally, I saw that they are going to, I think that their response about disability access said essentially like that they are in spaces that that are ADA compliant, which felt like there's, of course, a lot more opportunity to think about engaging disabled communities there. And then lastly, they have a beautiful website, which I was able to find when I Googled them, but their website link that they submitted just had like a typo in it. And so for any reviewer who might not have taken the extra step to try to find them online, then we would have missed that material, which I think was really, the material on the website was really helpful supplement. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. Other thoughts on this application?
I just wanted to say that I was really excited that they're going to bring Amanda Gorman to the festival and how important that is, because there's such a lack of opportunity for young people to see themselves reflected, but also like generationally that, this young audience could see a performer, an activist that's not that much older than them, and engage with them. So I was really excited about that aspect of the festival and wanted to lift that up.
Great, thank you. Other reflections, feedback that hasn't already been stated? Go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah, I really appreciate kind of the history of work that they've been doing as it's reflected in sort of their history of service, as well as their partnerships with institutions like the Carver Museum, that has kind of a direct impact on their constituency base. I think maybe one thing I would have liked just to see exemplified a little bit more is other opportunities they're creating, that, I mean, I think they do a really good job at outlining sort of the systemic benefits of these opportunities, but even really digging deeper into talking about those paid positions that they kind of had mentioned in the beginning, but just doing a little bit more to talk about those kinds of opportunities that they're providing for writers and poets and other artists here in Austin as well.
Okay, any other feedback for the applicant or about the application?
Yeah, Dr. Oliphant, if you're watching this, great job. Keep it up. I wonder how you're gonna have to deal with the whole chat GBT phenomenon going on, but it's just you're doing a great job, and thank you for doing it.
Thank you, panelists. If there are no further comments, and we have asked panelists not to repeat comments that have already been said, but to only add new comments that have not been stated by previous panelists. So if there are no further comments, if you would please, panel, finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Taylor, Lee, Sarah, Emily, Bill, and Richard. All right. Next application up for review is Kairos Creative Arts Center. Lee and Sarah are our primary and secondary. And Lee, whenever you're ready to begin.
Great. So the Kairos Creative Arts Center puts on an art show that is run by the participating artists. So it's kind of like by the artist for the artists in a way. That's based in Travis Heights, and it's based in Travis Heights and it's part of the Travis Heights Art Trail, and the mission of the Travis Heights Art Trail is to support, encourage working and emerging artists and craftspeople in Austin. So as an artist and somewhat craftsperson, I really appreciate the kind of the drive behind this, and think it's exciting to think about artists organizing their own kind of presentation of their work in this way. Overall, I didn't really see a clear outline of how this particular group or project is working with folks who are at risk of displacement or cultural erasure in Austin. It just didn't seem to be like one of their priorities or areas of focus. So I feel like that then kind of meant that most of the questions, while they seem to be doing interesting work, just didn't seem like it was that well aligned with this grant, including how they talked about the cultural leadership. There wasn't really a description of the cultural background or connection to constituents within that description, or in how they talked about intersectionality. Again, it just didn't seem to be, the response was pretty vague and light. And so I just overall thought it was interesting work, but not necessarily a fit for this application.
Thank you. Secondary, Sarah?
I don't have much additional or different comments to add. So I'm in agreement, and also felt like this application lacked proof of intersectionality and commitment to equity and inclusion through their mission. I appreciate that any neighborhood could have this available to them, but as far as I still have an understanding of Travis Heights, it's still predominantly a white neighborhood, and very upper middle class. And so just my knowledge of the neighborhood itself and the information given in the application, like Lee said, does not support the Elevate grant.
Other feedback on this application? Any thoughts that maybe have not been mentioned yet?
Again, we ask panelists to provide comments that have not been stated by other panelists? If there are no additional comments that have not already been stated by the primary or secondary, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sarah, Richard, Vale, Taylor, Lee, sorry, and Emily. Okay. I just realized those could sound similar. So we are skipping Early Era Collective for now, and we'll move on to Small Wonders Entertainment. Lee and Emily are our primary and secondary. So again, Small Wonders Entertainment next up for review, and Lee, whenever you are ready to begin.
Okay, well, let me, normally I can kind of pull them up in between, but now they're all back to back for me because you all are accommodating my schedule conflict. So let me just get on top of my game here.
And while she's pulling that up, just a reminder that the 10-minute timer will not start until the primary starts giving their commentary.
Okay, so Small Wonders Entertainment is a puppeteering group that offers senior citizens with puppet like theater and music, specifically, I guess, music that is rooted in that they really try to sync up with like the generations that are represented amongst that senior community. So overall, I thought that this is again like a really important work to do with our seniors. To specifically, they're focused on the benefits for folks with memory loss or Alzheimer's. Care is like seems to be really central for them. However, it wasn't clear to me that any of the that their focus is on seniors or elders that are of any of the like cultural backgrounds that we're focused on in this grant. So I didn't see that they're connecting their constituency to being at risk of cultural erasure or displacement from Austin. So everything else that they had to say about what they were doing, I thought, was good work, but seemed like not aligned with this particular grant. When they're talking about intersectionality, they're very much talking about just like being very inclusive. So maybe focused on the inclusive side of that title of the section, but really didn't get into the intersectional questions that are about compounded realities based on multiple identity markers. So overall, I didn't feel like it was a strong fit for this grant.
Thank you, Lee. Secondary, Emily. Oh, and you're muted, Emily.
Hey. Yeah, I mean, agreement with a lot of Lee's comments. As somebody who does do work with puppets, and I have such a strong interest in this population, I do feel like you can get extremely intersectional with the topic that you are approaching. And I would like to have seen that more described in your work. The other thing is just like for the future, this has the potential to be really impactful for the arts field and the puppetry field, the topic that you're approaching. And so I hope as you are growing this work that you're documenting what you're doing, because I think there's a lot of potential for growth there. I just am not sure it's in alignment with this grant.
Okay, thank you. Any other panelists with additional feedback that has not already been stated by primary or secondary panelists?
I appreciate Emily offering some feedback because I realized I skipped over that piece of it, and would just add on to what I thought were good suggestions from Emily. That, yeah, I think that in terms of clearly aligning with, like, for future grant applications, really rooting into like the aims of this particular grant and seeing, does it align with the work that you all are doing, and then really figuring out how to keep drawing those lines out, I think would make it easier as a reviewer to be able to see your relationship to the grant. Or if it doesn't, then either it's just not a good fit, or there's some interesting questions maybe for the work that you might do, not so much in your grant, but like in your actual work moving forward. So those were some of the reflections I had as I read through.
Thank you. Any others?
Thank you, panelists. If there are no additional comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Emily, Vale, Sarah, Lee, Richard, and Taylor. All right. So next application up for review is May the 4th Be With Y'all. Lee and Taylor are our primary and secondary. And Lee, whenever you're ready to begin.
One moment.
Sure.
Okay, so yeah, so May the 4th be with y'all, which as both an Austinite and, or like, having grown up in Austin and somebody who is super into Star Wars, loves just generally what you're up to. Oh, I guess I can say that they are they produce a variety of programming. They call it cultural enrichment and trying to foster community engagement that is centered around Star Wars universe, with the aim to bring Star Wars enthusiasts of all ages and backgrounds together, essentially. So again, that sounds super fun. I would personally love to attend such programming. And also, it wasn't clear to me that there was a precise emphasis on the communities at risk of displacement. I did see in the history of service some work with doing art education in low-income neighborhoods. So, that class is definitely a factor when we're thinking about, economics is definitely a factor when we're thinking about folks being at risk of displacement. I didn't really see the cultural erasure piece as much. I personally think there's a lot of interesting intersections that you could look at with Star Wars and kind of bringing an intersectional analysis or racial analysis, but I just didn't really see that as part of the focus here. And it felt for me like the places where I did see a little bit of connection to maybe the constituencies that this grant is focused on, it felt like a little bit of a stretch to me. So for me, it just didn't feel like a clear alignment with the aims of the grant.
Thank you, Lee. Secondary, Taylor?
Yes, I can definitely agree with my co-panelist Lee. I am also Star Wars enthusiast, although I've never actually participated in this event. I know firsthand a lot of people in Austin, especially, who take a lot of pride in this event. I think it's very of the ethos of, what Austin means when it says keep us weird. And I really appreciate how this organization is really more than just a kind of a Star Wars enthusiast program, but it really goes into arts programming, live music, dance showcases. They mentioned comedy, craft, costumes. And to Lee's point, I think that was a really great opportunity for them to demonstrate how they were prioritizing groups that experience cultural erasure within those opportunities, right? So I know they kind of touched on it, and I think that they have a really great start in their community partnerships. I think that if they, continue to cultivate that conversation and begin to prioritize sort of the paying of artists and educators and other collaborators that experience cultural erasure. This has the potential to be a really great proposal. Unfortunately, I just don't see it there yet. And that might be because they're just not there yet. Otherwise, really exciting Austin opportunity.
Super, thank you both. Any other additional comments from
From an
panelists?
Austin branding point of view, this could be the next Eeyore's birthday. It could be just another notch in the Keep Austin Weird belt. I thought that was a great idea, and Austin being a perfect fit.
Any other thoughts on this application in relation to the Elevate priorities and the criteria for this grant?
Seeing as there are no additional comments that have not already been stated, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores. And let me know when you have done so. Lee, Taylor, Vale, Richard, Sarah, and Emily. All right, next application up for review is Honk TX. Sarah and Lee are our primary and secondary. And Sarah, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yes, Honk TX, for those of you not as familiar, is a now fairly well nationally known annual festival in Austin with street bands, all different types of brass bands, street roaming bands. I think they use the word street bands, but it's a diversity of genres of music. So they're requesting funding for their festival in 2024. And I thought this was a great application. They had thorough responses to cultural relevance and community relations. I thought there was still some room for growth in leadership as it pertains to this grant in equity and inclusion within their cultural leadership. And then I also thought they were lacking some marketing details in their programming answer. But overall, I gave a high score for this applicant.
Thank you, Sarah. Lee?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. I also thought this was a strong application and gave it a high score and was especially excited to see too that they were working across a lot of different communities in addition to ones that are at risk of cultural erasure or displacement from Austin. There was, mention of other marginalized groups and just like a range of folks, including LGBTQ plus folks, and like people kind of representing, then that also coming through in their music and representing a wide range of traditions with deep cultural roots. So overall, I thought it was really strong, and I didn't really have any particular critiques for them.
Okay, great. Other additional responses? Again, you don't need to repeat things that have been shared already, but if you have other perspectives or additional feedback.
I just really appreciate seeing how this project has grown, and I appreciate all of the musicians and that they have brought to the table and the process and how they are doing it. Just good work happening and a real benefit to Austin.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Debbie and I were asking the same question. And I know there's a lot of applications, you'll have lots of notes, so we do give a little bit of time at the end just to see if there's anything you have to say or you'd like to say that's not being repetitive of what's already been stated. But seeing as there are no new comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Taylor and Lee, Sarah, Richard, everyone else. All right. And as was mentioned earlier, Lee had something that came up, so we'll be popping off of the call for a bit. Just for everybody, for the applicants in attendance, the written comments of any applications that Lee is missing, she will forward to us so we can get that to the rest of the panel. Lee will watch a recording of the applications that she misses, and that way she can see if any comments that they make change her scores or any of the written comments that she has are different from what the other panelists had said and would lead them to changing their scores. So we will pop back panel to Early Era Collective, and I'll give you all a few moments. So since we are going a little bit out of order. So Early Era Collective is what we're doing next. Sarah and Vale are our primary and secondary. A reminder that the 10-minute timer does not start until the primary starts giving their comments. And if you need a little bit of time because we're going back, that's fine. Just let me know.
Yeah, let me redirect. Let me.
Sure. And then if it's helpful after this, we will go to Austin Unconducted. So Early Era now, Austin Unconducted next, but Early Era Collective, Sarah, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. So this organization's mission is to present multi-form art featuring diverse perspectives for diverse audiences. They're a group of dancers, singers, actors, spoken word artists, and filmmakers. And I think that the funding is to support their upcoming year of programming from what I could read. I thought this was a great application, and my notes say that I appreciated their transparency and the details given. I don't have any other feedback. I thought it was a good application, and I appreciate their work.
Thank you, Sarah. Secondary, Vale?
Yeah, I agree. I thought this was a really strong proposal. I thought it was pretty clear from the information provided that serving the BIPOC and LGBTQ plus communities were a real priority for them. They seem to have leadership that is very representative of these communities. And I think the proposed activities are very focused on providing opportunities for those communities as well. So I thought it was a really strong application.
Any other thoughts? Other panelists with feedback on this application? We're looking at Early Era. Oh, Early Era, sorry. Sarah, I see your note. It's just that Lee is the secondary, and I think we're going to wait until she's back.
If there are no additional comments from the panel, again, we're asking panelists not to repeat anything that has already been stated, but any new comments or additional details on something that may have already been stated. Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Vale, Taylor, Richard, Emily, And Sarah. Okay, so that was Early Era Collective. We are moving on to Austin Unconducted. Vale and Taylor are our primary and secondary. And Vale, whenever you're ready to begin.
You. Austin Unconducted is a collaborative orchestra that performs and presents highly accessible and culturally reflective concerts with social hours, building community by inviting audiences of all backgrounds, ages, and musical interests to share cultural experiences. They're seeking funding to support their 2023-2024 season, I think, including concerts and fees for administrative work and audience cultivation. I think overall this was a strong proposal. I think that at times it could have been more explicit about their key constituencies, but I did see an overall dedication to serving BIPOC and LGBTQ plus communities through amplifying works by artists from those communities. And I also really thought it was really interesting, their model of like partnering with a curator from a marginalized community. That really spoke to me, and I thought was a really interesting idea and a great way to really center community voice. I also think it wasn't detailed as much in the programmatic reach section, but more under their cultural activities section in the application. But I appreciated how they had a very clear marketing plan about how they hope to reach new audiences, specifically in the BIPOC community.
Thank you. Secondary, Taylor.
Yeah, I struggled a little bit with this application. Kind of one of those gray area ones where it feels, incorporating voices of key constituencies is new. It's something that they've seen a need for and they want to bring in, and I respect that. I also really appreciate using curators as a way to connect with these communities. They've worked with a couple of curators whose work I'm familiar with in Austin. So I know that they are kind of, doing their research to reach out with people who have connections. I like this idea that this is a non-conductor led orchestra that is internally communicated with through music, and again bringing that music into unconventional places. But again, I would have liked them to see them come out the gate being intentional about their key constituencies that sort of align with this grant. I think they kind of teeter on that edge of wanting to be inclusive of all. But I think for the purposes of this grant, the applicants that are scoring, the applications that try not to compare, but I think a higher score from me would have come from the kind of really commitment to that. And I can see them kind of not wanting to box themselves in a little bit, if you will. But all in all, I think it's a really great community collaboration across different artistic modals. And I think that that's something very new and exciting. So.
Great, thank you. Any other feedback from panelists?
Just as a recovering classical music kid, I really appreciated, to second this, not having a conductor. It seemed like in every part of the application that this is working towards being an ensemble of the community, and not personality driven, which I feel like, I know I'm trying to articulate this in the right thing, but I feel like you're getting into a phase of artistic exploration that has the potential to be really exciting, and to keep digging at it, because I was really excited by this application. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. While panelists are looking to see if they have any additional comments that haven't been repeated, just clarity for the applicant who may be watching live or maybe watching recording. one of the panelists said that they were trying not to compare, and that is because we have asked the panelists not to compare applications to each other, but just how they how each specific application meets the review criteria. So that was why that comment was made. With that being said, any additional comments from the panel that have not already been stated? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Emily, Vale, Taylor, Sarah, and Richard. All right, and that was Austin unconducted. We are going to skip around a little bit again. We are moving on. Since Lee is off for a bit, we're not doing any that she's primary or secondary on. So we're going to move to Lulu Fest next. Vale and Sarah are our primary and secondary. So Lulu Fest is the next application up for review. And I know since we're going out of order, yes.
Yeah, can I request like maybe a 2-minute, I kind of get everything together by section. So I don't have anything open for this section yet. Could we do like a minute pause?
Yeah.
Maybe so I can select, and catch up to you guys real quick if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I was just going to say, it doesn't start till the primary starts stating their notes. But if you need to bring that up, we want the other panelists to be able to have that as well. Because again, you have taken notes, you've given tentative scores and comments, so you want to have that open while the other panelists are giving their commentary, so you can make sure that it's in alignment. And Taylor looks like she's good. And so again, Lulu Fest, next application up for review. Vale and Sarah are primary and secondary. And Vale, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. Lulu Fest is a 2-day festival of American acoustic improvised music featuring 6 all-women-led bands. The festival includes evening concerts and an afternoon masterclass, and all events take place at the Boyd Vance Theater or the George Washington Carver Museum and Cultural Center. I think this is a really cool project. The festival sounds really awesome to see so much improvised music being focused on, and to be all women led. I think what was a little challenging for me with this application is I didn't see always a very clear priority or focus placed on communities that are at risk of cultural erasure and displacement. I think it was kind of mentioned in some sections, but kind of very briefly. And so I was just hoping for more kind of concrete evidence and documentation to support that being a priority. I think there was a really heavy emphasis placed on women in jazz and improv, which is, super important and great, but I would have liked to see a bit more on the intersectionality of women that are women of color, or that, have other marginalization that is a bit more in line with this grants program.
Thank you, Vale. Secondary, Sarah?
Going off my notes, I was trying to see if I could kind of tag on to what Bill said, but I'll just go off what I have so far on my notes, which is that overall I scored this application fairly high. And I thought they're doing great work in the community, and specifically I wanted to commend them on their inclusion of young talent and mentorship, because it's a competitive city and it's hard to get opportunities for performance when you're under 18.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other feedback from other panelists? Additional thoughts that have not been stated already?
I'd like to give panelists a little bit of time to look through their notes, make sure they don't have anything additional they'd like to add. Again, we're asking panelists not to repeat what has been stated by other panelists. Providing additional details, even if something was touched on by another panelist, is fine. But if there are no new additional comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Richard and Sarah, Taylor and Vale, and Emily. All right, so that was Lulu Fest. And we are, if we would have been going in order, kind of where we would be for a break. So let's go ahead and take our break now. It's 1:43. Let's just reconvene at 2 o'clock. That'll just be the easiest. We're slightly ahead of schedule, so we will pause the recording. So we are back from break. Lee is back, so a reminder that she will watch the video for the 3, I believe it was, applications that she missed, so she can take a look at the other panelists' comments, see if that changes her score. We will get written comments from her on those as well. So we are reviewing We Love Video Film and Cultural Festival next. Sarah and Lee are our primary and secondary. Let me get the timer ready, and the time will start whenever the primary starts giving their comments. Sarah, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so We Love Video was, I believe they were founded as a nonprofit just in 2022 to preserve the collection of the longstanding Austin video rental store called I Love Video. I'm a fan of this preservation effort, and because I was a longtime customer and was sad to see another Austin independent business go. Their ask for funding is mostly for operational costs, specifically air conditioning unit. And so again, I appreciate their mission and their the fact that they have founded to preserve this part of kind of film and video history in Austin. But I feel like their application lacked in areas of having a mission that specifically served communities facing cultural erasure and didn't prioritize intersectionality necessarily. I'm also somewhat unsure about accessibility in their new building based on their answers, even though their funding will go towards the building. So just kind of like conflict there for me as far as what Elevate is meant for.
Yeah, I also have a deep love for I Love Video, and by extension, have a lot of appreciation for We Love Video. I don't know if We Love Video is doing like free beer on Tuesdays, like I Love Video used to. But in any case, I was excited to see their work in here and kind of preservation efforts. I think that that's really exciting. And yeah, to agree with Sarah, I didn't see any like particular focus on folks who are at risk of displacement or cultural erasure. They did talk about LGBTQ folks being a priority population for them, and are reflected in almost half of their board, or kind of, I don't know if they called it a board, but they're kind of like leadership group. And that's, they have an extensive collection of LGBTQ films. However, even that didn't feel like it wasn't clear to me based on the materials that they presented or their website that was like an actual emphasis of their mission, of their work. It seemed like it could also just be a thing that so happens to be the case. So unfortunately for me, it was hard for me to see an alignment with the aims of this grant. And I think in their disability piece as well, they said something about hoping to do more for disability access, but we were really vague about it. So I feel like in terms of future, for future proposals, that the more specificity that can be offered, just the more that it will give us as reviewers the opportunity to really get an understanding of your vision, your plan, what you aim to do with it, and see how it aligns with the goals of the grant.
Okay. Any other feedback on this application?
I mean,
see-
We Heart Video is a Austin institution. If there was any place to get any films on regarding intersectionality and inclusion, that was the place to go. We Heart Video they're the only ones in Austin that would represent those type of genres. And so in that regard, they typify and seem to be the only ones to be protecting not only those genres, but the history. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Taylor, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I second that, Richard. I think that this is a really great project for cultural preservation and archival work. As somebody who grew up going to Blockbuster and Hollywood Video every chance I get, this brings back a lot of memories for me that I think, our whole country is at risk of losing. I also think that there's a strong opportunity for this to kind of collaborate with filmmakers and local filmmakers and the film culture in Austin, and as far as like showcasing work by local filmmakers, and I think they might actually do a lot of that as well. So once they are able to kind of get their facility needs met, I would love to see them kind of come back with a more arts focused funding opportunities where they're paying artists and also supporting this archival work. So.
Thank you. Other feedback, reflections?
While panelists are thinking, I was going to mention this earlier, and then also with what Taylor just said, served as a reminder for me. Staff has not reviewed these applications in detail, but we are looking at them as they come up, just, when y'all are making comments. So the comments about the AC, Elevate is kind of general operating support, but capital improvements are not allowed. So if this application were to score high enough to receive funding, before we entered into contract with them, we would make sure, the award was being used on correct amounts. And I mentioned that in regard to Taylor's comment about, kind of more artistic focus. Now, space rental, all that, that's fine, but, purchasing equipment, capital improvements is not an allowable expense. Again, not having looked in detail at the budget, I did download the budget form real quick and see that they mentioned that on there, but just keeping that in mind for the panel, for the applicant as well, if they're watching now or a recording later on. With that being said, just under 3 minutes left. Any additional comments that have not already been stated by any of the panelists? Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Looks like everybody has finalized their scores. Okay. So again, we're skipping around just a bit, and then we'll be back in a normal order. Violet Crown Players up next, Uprise Circus after that, and we'll be back in the normal order. So Violet Crown Players up next for review. Lee and Vale are our primary and secondary, and the timer will start whenever the primary begins giving their comments. If you need a few moments, Lee, that's fine. Violet Crown Players.
Right. So Violet Crown Players is seems like a fairly dynamic arts organization that is focused on theater and dance programming for a range of folks. They are the parent organization to Diverse Space Youth Dance Theater. So there's a professional youth company that they focus a lot of their application on as well. But in any case, they're using dance, not just I think for the kind of opportunity to teach the skills of dance, but also as an opportunity to build other skill sets for young people and offer opportunities to artists, local artists and musicians, actors and singers. I felt like they have an emphasis certainly on economics and kind of trying to make things accessible from an economic standpoint. And I got some sense of racial equity in their work and kind of cultural equity or like cultural engagement in their work. But it wasn't clear to me that either of those were a focus of their work. Affordability seemed to be the primary focus to me. So that's definitely, part of the conversation with folks who are at risk of displacement, but not really cultural erasure. So that was one thing that stood out for me, is just not being sure that their constituency aligned with the aims of the grant. And I also didn't see it reflected in their response to their cultural activities. I didn't see equity or culturally related relevant activities described. I do, have personal excitement and experience with like what can happen from youth, especially youth programming in dance and the arts, and how, transformative that can be. And I saw there was description of the ways that pathways were created for higher training and dance programs and mentorship and so on. So that was also really exciting. However, either the work itself seems like there's an opportunity for growth in alignment with this grant around a particular focus on communities that are at risk of cultural erasure, and or the application needed some more articulation of that to come through strongly.
Thank you, Lee. Secondary, Val?
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add to Lee. I agreed. I think it sounds like a really cool program, really great programming for young children, but I didn't just see that alignment explicitly stated when it came to communities that are at risk of cultural erasure and displacement. I think there was like one part that mentioned some programming specifically for migrant children, which I was really eager to learn more, but it was very brief. And so I wish that there had just been maybe some more about that. A piece of feedback that I also have, and I don't know, other panelists might think differently, but this application included a lot of additional documentation that was uploaded. And I think sometimes it can be really helpful, but sometimes it also can be a little bit overwhelming and a bit hard for us as panelists to take a look through when there's so much additional documentation. So maybe a recommendation I have is to really think about the recommendations or restrictions that the city has placed when it comes to documentation, and thinking about providing the strongest evidence for your project.
Okay. Great. Other thoughts, feedback on this application or for the applicant? Additional thoughts that haven't been shared already?
I can just add a personal knowledge of this group. I would agree that I'm not sure if the original mission and the founding history was to reach out to the communities that Elevate Grant is focusing on, but I was in this company for several years, and they're giving opportunities to people for performance that I was out of college, and there's not a lot of opportunities for dance in this city actually, and so I just wanted to add that the opportunities for young people. I don't think this grant would fund that, but they bring their young people to Europe every year and give them those experiences. So I just wanted to add that they're doing great work on that side.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, insights?
Seeing as there are no other comments, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Sarah, Vale, Lee, Taylor, everyone else. All righty. So that was Violet Crown Players. Now we are going to Uprise Circus, and we will continue reviewing in the order. I believe that's both listed on our website and in the run of show that we have sent to you panelists. So next application up for review is Uprise Circus. Vale and Richard are our primary and secondary. And Vale, whenever you're ready to begin.
Uprise Circus uses evidence-based, arts-focused teaching methods to cultivate personal and emotional development for Austin teens. They provide inclusive, accessible, zero-cost flying trapeze lessons to young adults who are members of historically marginalized communities and or who have a history of trauma. Students experience the transformative power of circus arts classes led by teachers trained in trauma-sensitive methods for nurturing positive mental health, confidence, and social connections. I thought this was a really strong application. I could see very clearly that their mission and their history of service is rooted in serving historically marginalized teens. It seems that a majority of their leadership has lived experience in the LGBTQ communities, as well as like the neurodivergent communities. I know they also mentioned that they're hoping to hire a DEI consultant to bring more BIPOC leadership into their organization, which I appreciate their transparency around that and their plans moving forward with that. I also really appreciated that they mention when it comes to their volunteers that they cover the background check costs for volunteers that are of communities that are historically marginalized. And I also really liked how they have a option for students once they turn 18 that they can transition to being an instructor in training. So I think that there really was kind of a path of long-term investment in their participants and students and real potential for this to turn into a career path for some of them.
Thank you, Vale. Secondary, Richard?
Okay, in this application, I didn't see the section for insanity regarding trapeze in artistry. So missed that one. This is quite the organization. I was I was just afraid reading it and seeing what these people do. So what gives me most pause is this is of athleticism, and where does the tipping point of athleticism go on to performing arts? And this is an cultural arts funding mechanism. So I have a real dueling thing going on with funding gymnastics when we have arts organizations that have artists as their constituencies. So that was kind of my pause in regarding their application.
Hey, I see a hand, Emily.
I just wanted to interject there. Within the performing arts ecosystem, circus arts is huge. Um, I just internationally, of course, you go to Montreal, but all over the world, um, circus is performed in performing arts venues. Um, I think even BAM has a circus series. And then also there's, from what I know, I mean, I don't have a lot of expertise on this, but there's also um, like a youth circus arts social, some sort of social justice movement that's happening that I only have faint knowledge of it. So, I mean, I feel that we're definitely funding art, and advancing the cultural conversation of what's happening in Austin. And I also just want to echo that I think this is a really exciting work happening with young people.
Great, thank you. Any other, I see your hand, Taylor.
Yeah, I'd just like to second that. I think intersectionality in this particular application is really interesting as it intersects, youth and mental health. And I sort of consider youth to be an underserved community by a lot of city organizations, especially youth in foster care and youth that are in the system. So being able to tend to that mental health through creative expression, through a kind of performance art that not a lot of youth, but definitely not a lot of youth from marginalized communities have access to, and really sort of waiving that kind of financial barrier to that. This is a really exciting opportunity, and I like the idea that you can they can stay further on even as they age out, and also sort of the lengths that they describe they go to keep their youth connected in the arts when they move out of Austin, and if they want to continue participating in that.
Great, thanks for lifting that up.
I will say just some clarification for the panel. The Cultural Arts Division does take a broad definition of what is considered the arts. So arts and cultural organizations are what we fund. If this application does score high enough, we'll take a look to see if it meets our definition. I will say in the past, we have funded organizations that have done, aerial type arts. I don't want to list specific organizations or specific groups, but we have funded stuff like that in the past. But that being said, if it is something that's not considered a traditional art form just for the applicant, they may want to, and again, staff has not looked at these applications in detail, but if it's something that's not one of the more traditional art forms, something that may make applications stronger in the future is to explain how that is, if there could be any question on whether that is something that would be funded by the Cultural Arts Division. So we have about 3 minutes left if there are additional comments from the panel. If there are no new comments that haven't been stated by panelists previously, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Vale and Sarah, Emily, Lee, Taylor, and Richard. All right, next application up for review is Exploded Drawing. Richard and Emily are our primary and secondary. And Richard, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, so Exploded Drawing, this is very interesting. It's a monthly event in Austin for electronic music composers, sound collectors, and beat makers. It's kind of its own genre, but it's got a solid fan base out there in the music world. So that, live music capital of the world, love that. they were coming up with, I think, 6 concerts that they want us to fund. And here's what I find interesting. So, of these were my notes. Of these, there they are. Okay, so this is the irony. There's 11 performers they got, and they're, really good, all different types. Their intersectionality and inclusion is just great. But in this regard, we are funding Austin artists. And if you look at their lineup for the concerts they want us to fund, 8 out of 11 are not from Austin. Only 3 are from Austin. So herein lies a dichotomy of funding and this year's, criteria. Jesus might understand this. 2-3 years ago, the funding criteria was to see who could fill hotel rooms. So bringing in these 8 artists from LA and New York, we'd have to give them the highest scores possible. This criteria, no, 8 out of 11 artists aren't. So we can't really, reward them. So therein lies the duality of this, because I thought it's such a great concept, fit Austin well. But then 8 out of 11, we have to, I don't want to say penalize, but doesn't really fit. So therein lies the duality and dichotomy of this application.
Thank you, Richard. And so before we move on to the secondary, just we do allow outside artists to be funded. So that is okay to do that. We do say that one of the priorities for Elevate is projects that invest in local artists. Doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be all of that, but that may affect your score on how much of that budget is going to that and how much of it is not. But again, it is fine to have outside artists coming in. And then as far as like hotel rooms and out of town artists, our funding source is the hotel occupancy tax. And so because of that, there has to be a public component. Anybody who is receives funding will be required to post their event on visitaustin.com, which will reach out and let tourists who are visiting Austin know about the activity that is open to the general public for them to come and see. So with that being said, secondary, Emily?
I could be wrong, and I've read 60 applications, so maybe some of the other panelists, if they remember, but if I remember closely, the way that they program is that they have an out-of-town artist, but then they also have like 6 people that are local during that one night. Am I okay? Okay, so I and maybe somebody else could when the time comes to, but that's what I recall. I'm trying to find it on the application. But I had some other, something that I really appreciate about the electronic music community, that it is so diverse and you do have the opportunity to program through an intersectional lens. And I think that this organization is doing that. My big concern is that the founders seem to have been doing this for a long time, and that just, as your organization is growing, like that's just a lot to fall on 2 people, and it looks like it also is a really small board. So I just hope that the organization is thinking like long term how we're going to sustain, because I tell every single founder, no matter who it is, I'm like, what's going to happen when you want to go and do something else? So that was just something that popped up for me. But I think the programming, I really like the programming, the curation, the partnerships, and I like who you're bringing to the table. They have a lot of volunteer base, in-kind support, have opportunity creation. They have a long history of paying artists and presenting underrepresented artists. I saw that Jackie Vinson was presented there, and she did like a set of her electronic music, and I think that's really cool to like incorporate artists known for something else and giving them the space to experiment with something. They have a really cool program with Texas School for the Blind. And part of this budget, if awarded, would go towards doing more EDI work as well as paying artists and admin fees. I was excited about the work happening with the organization and the application.
Super, thank you. Other feedback, I know Emily was calling out to her colleagues to fill in if there was something you wanted to add, but yeah, I see you, Vale.
Yeah, just confirming that the application does say that they bring in a guest artist, but then that same night they have 5 local artists that perform leading up to the guest artist performance. So it seems to be a stacked lineup for each time.
Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah, I also really appreciated the specificity and the priorities for engaging with groups that have experienced cultural erasure, institutionalized marginalization. I would definitely challenge this applicant to start to reflect that in their cultural leadership. And I know they're giving a lot of opportunities to performers, and I think that is really, really important. And I want to see that there's maybe some investment in the kind of longevity of their presence in this organization and the creative direction.
Thanks for the guidance. Couple more minutes left still. If folks have anything else to add, additional comments that have not already been expressed. Lee, is that a hand? No? Okay.
Thank you, panelists. If there are no further comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Sarah? Vale? Lee? Taylor? Emily? And Richard. Thank you. Next application up for review is La Fenice. Emily and Vale are our primary and secondary. And Emily, whenever you're ready to begin.
Yeah, La Fenice is been around. I'm trying to find my notes. They were founded to bring Del Art to the community. It seems like their organization has expanded, doing all kinds of stuff, such as devised theater, site-specific improv work. I like, there's a lot of stuff that I really like in this application. I feel like I had to dig for the information a bit. One of the things they're doing, they're choosing sites to create performances. The Haskell House. They're also bringing free mass movement and devising master classes to the community. And the organization is BIPOC led. And I'm just trying to find what else. They're really interested in creating accessible performance, and their productions are a pass the hat ticketing model, so everyone can come. And yeah, so I mean that's where I'm in. It seemed like in their intersectionality and inclusion section, they more talked about how they approach the content of what they're doing versus like the structure of the organization and the communities. that they're reaching. I would have liked some more detail there, as well as their community relationships. And also in terms of their community relationships, they have all of these arts organizations that they're partnering with, but also, you know, what happens and how do they grow their audience when they partner with non-arts organizations? I'm curious about who gets to come to the table. I see a lot of potential for that. But yeah, that's what, it's good work, strong application, but I just had to dig for the information a bit. I would have liked more detail. And I knew who the artists were, so you know, I have great faith in their work and experience of past work.
Thank you. Secondary, Bill?
I agree with a lot of what Emily said. I think what was very clear to me from their proposal is that they have taken a lot of reflection on their organization, and it was more recently in 2020 that they started to really focus on BIPOC and LGBTQ communities and representation there. I think that at times it still could have been a bit more explicit in their answers on how they serve these communities and integrate their voices. At times it was super clear, and kind of like what Emily was saying, at times you had to just kind of dig around a bit more to find that info. There was a talk in the opportunity creation section about opportunities for young scholars, and I would have liked to see just kind of more information about that, and maybe more information about what communities they're prioritizing in that Young Scholars Program. But overall, I thought it was a strong application.
Great. Any other feedback from the other panelists on this application? Go ahead, Taylor.
I think this is one of those applications, kind of like Vale said, where they've definitely done a lot of reflection and started to evolve a lot of their missions. I think this is a very sensitive topic that they are choosing to embark on. So I really do applaud them in making the kind of community relationships that are going to be necessary to tell the story respectfully and accurately. And I think that that's going to be super important as they move forward. And I'm excited to see them continue this line of programming and like very culturally sensitive and specific kinds of stories that they're telling. But I do want to recognize that this particular topic is very important, that, you know, they are bringing in experts from these communities of stories that they want to tell, so that it's not coming off as tokenized or culturally appropriating that story as well.
Any other voices that want to be in this?
I think I have one more thing to add. I had a comment, but I think when approaching for the future writing about this, to approach, and a lot of applicants, to approach it as you're writing for someone who has no experience with any of the disciplines that are happening. I think that would be my main comment of going towards the future. It's just as much detail as possible, and just assume that whoever's reading it never has done any of this kind of work before.
Sound advice for all applications. Thank you. Any other thoughts, reflections?
Seeing as there are no additional comments from the panel, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sarah, Vale, Richard, Taylor, Emily, and Lee. Okay. We are scheduled for a break. We're about 20 minutes ahead of schedule. We have 5 more applications. I know, looking at a screen and sitting down. Let's go ahead and take a break. It's a 10-minute break. It's 2:40, so we will pause the recording. We are back from break, and our next application up for review is Austin Oida Sister City Committee. Lee and Emily are our primary and secondary, and Lee, whenever you're ready to begin.
Give me 1 second. I forgot I was up next after break. Let me pull up my materials.
That's fine. Just a reminder that we will not start the timer until the primary starts giving their comments.
Okay, so the Austin Oida Sister City Committee is essentially a committee that is working as a sister city with Oita, Japan, and doing several different types of cross-cultural events throughout the year. Since 1990, this has been, well, it's been a sister city, and so there's been programming. No, sorry, since 1990, the organization has existed. The sister city ship happened in 56. Generally the work is really focused on this cross-cultural exchange and kind of highlighting the relationship, as well as like the relationship between the cities and the culture, like Japanese culture generally. And so it seems like really great work. It never hurts for us to be reminded of how connected we are across the globe, and I'm excited to see. I didn't totally know that Sister Cities was like still a thing that was happening, so I was glad to see that was, seems like they're quite active. I didn't feel like their application really spoke to how they saw themselves situated in the context of cultural erasure even. So that was, obviously they are deeply culturally rooted, and I didn't see that was how they understood themselves to be, as like at risk of cultural erasure. But even more to the point, like their application didn't reflect any relationship to displacement or the possibility of displacement. So that was kind of a common thread of across the application, feeling like it just, while it was great work, didn't seem super aligned. And I didn't see, again, in some of the different opportunities throughout the application where that could have been, those connections might have been made, or some of that could have been elaborated on. I just didn't see much information, like on the intersectionality question, or questions about I think it was well, I'll just stop trying to skim all my notes and say intersectionality. And then additionally, I was hoping to see some clear plans for their how to create greater accessibility for disabled folks, as well as how to even just like broaden their reach through their marketing. So again, strong work, but didn't see how it fit our aims with this grant.
Just to add to what Lee said, just a lot of missing details in the questions. In terms of cultural leadership, it seemed very top down, and I'm curious, I just wonder, as the organization moves forward, how this can be a more collaborative and collective approach. in community voice, they mentioned there have been rifts in the Asian and Japanese community in the past with a sense of competitiveness, and they aim to be inclusive of all Japan-related organizations, and I just appreciated that, to have everyone at the table. The programming looks really fun, and I know a lot of young people, when I lived in Austin, really loved this event. On intersectionality, just more details how you approach intersectionality through your programming selections as well as within the community you're serving and how you're bringing people to the table. More detail on who is sponsoring the fest. More detail in terms of opportunity creation and community benefit, like how many people are you serving a year? How many artists are being paid for the festival? Agree with Lee about gearing programming towards individuals with disability. Language access, there's English and Japanese translation. Like what happens, when we also have translations in Spanish, bringing in the Latinx community to this work. But yeah, just an application, like I know the work is good, I just want to see more details.
All right. Any other thoughts, feedback on this application? Additional comments that we haven't heard? I see Taylor.
Yeah, I also was shocked and excited to hear of a sister community with Austin. And I do think that inherently this is a proposal that will be elevating the diverse arts and culture sector just by the nature of the transcontinental artist exchange that they have. I would have liked to see a little bit more about that exchange. And kind of speaking in more broadly, I know we've talked a lot about supporting artists locally versus bringing artists in. And I do think there's something to be said about including artists in the sort of national and international canon of art and conversation and in that cultural exchange that happens. So I think this organization puts themselves at a really interesting point of that. And I think that they could have taken just a little bit extra step to talk about their relationship in that kind of nexus. I also think it's really interesting that their board is 25 people. There's a lot of people on their board. I would have loved to hear a little bit more about their roles in the creative direction or other kinds of direction, given that is a very sizable board and has the potential to support a very large production. So some.
Thank you. Other reflections, feedback? 3 minutes.
There is a bit more time, but just wanted to let everybody know we had about 3 minutes left to review applications. Again, we're not asking panelists to repeat what has already been said, just to give any new comments or provide additional detail if something had been already stated, and you just wanted to give a bit more detail about that. But if there are no additional comments on this application, seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sarah, Taylor, Lee, Richard, Vale, and Emily. All right, next application up for review is Austin Rainbow Theater. Taylor and Richard are our primary and secondary. And Taylor, whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay, so we have Austin Rainbow Theater. Austin Rainbow Theater is an LGBTQAI plus theater company that focuses on showcasing thought-provoking plays that shed light on those social issues and welfare. They're asking for funds to support their 2023-24 season that will showcase 4 different plays that will increase LGBTQAI and community visibility. They look to create opportunities for artists from that group and provide artists with fair compensation. Overall, I gave this project scored really high for me due to the nature of the constituencies that they serve, their history of being founded around serving those constituencies, as well as the community voice aspect, sorry. As well as the community voice aspect, I felt like they were integrating sort of the stories and the lives from their immediate community into, what they're choosing to produce on stage. I appreciated the way that their cultural leadership reflected those missions and contained people that have lived experiences in these community groups. I really appreciated the breakdown of the kind of stories that they were planning on telling, the plays that they're going to be producing, and how those all work into sort of the intersectionality of those who are LGBTQAI and the kind of compounding experiences that they face through storytelling and theater. All in all, yeah, it's scored pretty high for me, so I don't really have any other notes. So thanks.
Thank you, Taylor. Secondary, Richard.
Okay, so overall, I thought there was a great program. It's recently formed. They got 4 upcoming shows. I like the selection and variety. Fills a special and necessary niche. Wants to commit 3 shows per year, which is great. Putting on a play is not easy. So 3 shows per year is, it's going to be their time's going to be filled. The mission, they're pushing a necessary conversation, very timely and needed. Their history is service. They have a short history, so they're going to have to prove themselves in the next couple of years. With their impressive leadership, I have no doubt that they will. They have collaboration when choosing their future production. As far as cultural activities, art in general is meant to provoke thought and hopefully change. So theater productions are even more provoking with active storytelling. So, I really like this idea. Intersectionality and inclusion, I mean, that's their mission. They're going to be acting with partner groups and theaters, and they're going to offer a lot of opportunities. Austin needs more theater play opportunities. Anytime you can get more theater groups, that's what we need. So overall, I just really like this proposal, and I think there'll be a great addition, especially as the years go down the road.
Great. Any other thoughts? I see a hand. Hi, Emily, go for it.
I had a couple of this application is great, so I second everything. I see this organization has the potential to expand really quickly because it's such a huge need in the community. And I see that your board, you only have 4 people, which is completely normal. But I just would, as you think about going, making this exciting season happen, just really develop strategies to build that board, because I have a feeling y'all are gonna grow really fast and you have the potential of really making just a long-term impact in the city. So that was just something that popped out to me as I was reading and learning about the organization.
Great.
I was also going to just share that I was excited under cultural leadership to see that it was 100% of their leadership is of the constituency that they're serving. I think that there's just a lot of strength in that for any group that is made up of the folks that they mean to be working with and providing kind of artistic offerings to. And additionally, I thought it just in terms of reflection on the application itself, I thought it was just it was really strong to start off the application by laying out the kind of state of the Texas legislature and the they say anti-LGBTQIA plus, but I think I'm thinking largely about anti-trans and anti-trans bills, as well as some other broadly queer bills. In any case, I thought that was just a really strong place to situate themselves within this application, because it's not necessarily a group that comes to top of mind when I think about displacement, but I think by effect of laws, it is that is a threat. There is a threat to those communities for having to relocate. So I just thought that was a great way to frame their work.
Still, inviting feedback from folks who have not had a chance to say anything on this one. Otherwise, I'll hand it to you, Jesus.
Thank you, Sudhabi. By giving panelists a bit of a chance to look at their notes, as again, we are asking them not to repeat comments that have already been stated, but if they do have anything new that has not already been stated. Seeing as there are no additional comments, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Taylor, Richard, Lee, Emily, Vale, and Sarah. Okay, our next application up for review is ASCI, Austin Sister City International. It's listed as ASCI, I believe, in portal. Richard and Vale are our primary and secondary. And Richard, whenever you're ready to begin.
It just crashed on me. Austin Sister City International. So it's basically created by Eisenhower after World War II to get us to have sister cities to share and be much more of a world community. So that's kind of its background. I'm getting to my notes because it crashed on me. A lot of it, I think this one has 13 cities. They have a festival. It is also funded by the Austin Economic Development Department, which makes perfect sense because a lot of this is for, trade, to swap, stuff from those cities and from Austin. So, and then in that there's arts and culture. So it has a arts element, not as much that I think, it has much more of an economic impact rather than arts, but sure, it has that element. As far as intersectionality and inclusion, it's more between the two cultures than within the US. So it's a good application. It's just missing varying arts and inclusion elements. So that's my take.
Thank you, Richard. Secondary, Val?
Yeah, I think what was really missing for me from this proposal is that it was never clearly outlined what all 18 of the sister cities are. And so it was hard for me to see if there is a specific alignment between this organization and this proposal and the grants program, because to me there wasn't a very clear focus on communities that are at risk of cultural erasure and displacement within Austin. So I think if there had been more detail, that would have been really helpful, and would have helped me see if there is a real connection, if this is the right fit for this grants program.
Okay, Go ahead, Taylor. I think I saw your hand.
Yeah, Vale, I will say that their website landing page has that global map. But I think to your point, even with the inclusion of all those cities, yeah, it's not really focusing on, how that's translating to the communities here that are experiencing cultural erasure and displacement. And so I think it's kind of one of those hard gray area, teetering, tottering ones where we're inclusive and we're in a lot of countries that might represent folks from our community, in countries from folks that represent our community here, but maybe not exactly aligning with the parameters for this grant. But
Yeah, I was going in the same circles and found that on the website as well. And I kind of just felt like maybe in terms of feedback for applications in the future, that if those connections are being made, if part of how, this organization is understanding their work is to be this place that is bringing together people's roots as it relates to the folks in Austin, then I would have just liked to have seen that spelled out more clearly, so that I could get that understanding of how they are connecting to this very place-based grant in Austin.
Great. Any other thoughts on this initiative?
Any additional comments? Not seeing any from the panel. Seeing as there are none, if you would please finalize your scores and let me know when you've done so. Lee, Taylor, Sarah, and everyone else. All right. Next application up for review is Inside Out Steel Band. Vale and Lee are our primary and secondary, and Vale, whenever you're ready to begin.
Thank you. Inside Out Steel Band's mission is to create community through music. They provide public performances, workshops, artist in residence programs, and summer camps in traditional Trinidadian steel pan music. And I believe that their proposal is to support their upcoming season, or actually it might be this current season, apologies, that they're currently in right now. I think that this is a really awesome program with a really great focus on Trinidadian steel drumming. I think what was tricky for me was the cultural leadership aspect of this program was unclear. It was unclear who the leaders really are and whether they have lived experience in the community of Trinidadian immigrants. So I also think they identified the key constituencies as like general youth populations and students and their families. Hard to see that direct connection again to like communities that are at risk of cultural erasure and displacement as being served by this work. There was a lot of focus on bringing in artists from Trinidad, which I know, as Jesus has said, is totally within the parameters of this work. But there was mention of other guest artists in the area as well, but I think still just a question from me was whether those artists also have lived experience in the community as well.
Thank you, Vale. Secondary, Lee.
Yeah, I don't have terribly much more to add other than some thoughts about applications, like how Inside Out Steel Band might approach this in the future. Some of my background is in having managed a grant fund, and so like reading lots of applications, and so there are many grants that are that like this proposal as it's written probably would be strong, but this particular grant is so uniquely and excitingly asking asking us all to look at cultural erasure and displacement. And so I just feel like that wasn't, if we were going to be able to see that in this application, we'd have to be, as panelists, making a lot of leaps to understand that. So I think this was really an opportunity for the writer of the application to spell that out more specifically for us, if in fact it is there, and if it isn't, then also like possibly this wasn't necessarily the most aligned grant. And I know there are many other exciting grants that the city offers that maybe this would have been a good fit for. So yeah, that's my addition.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Seeing as there are no additional comments. And again, we're not repeating what has already been stated. So if there are no new comments to add, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Sarah, Vale, Lee, Richard, Emily, and Taylor. And we are up to our last application for today. Different stages. Lee and Richard are our primary and secondary. And Lee, whenever you are ready to begin.
Great. Let me just pull it up here. Okay. Okay, so at the end of the day, of course, you have way too many tabs open. So Different Stages is a theater company in Austin that is also incorporated as a nonprofit for the last almost 40 years and is committed to the performance not only of famous plays, but also of, as they say, lesser known works. And they have produced quite a range of plays ranging from romantic to neoclassical and onto works that were translated by Austin scholars. So on their piece, get the other tab. Sorry, I started and then I realized I didn't have the other pieces ready. But we'll make sure you get all your time, Different Stages. Okay, so yeah, this I come from theater communities in Austin, so I'm always excited to see kind of what's happening now and to see them continuing their work. And it seems like they have a real commitment to producing quite a range of types of work and bringing that forward. So just generally as a theater company, this seems like great work. I will say that I didn't see a clear alignment, again, with our goals for this grant in terms of being focused on working with communities at risk of cultural erasure or displacement. They did list in their history of service some notes about, I think it just happened to be in that section that they listed some notes about working with non-white actors. It's hard to try to assess tone and intent, etc., from words on a page, but there were ways in which that started to feel a little bit like tokenizing and not so much like this is a reflection of our values. So that was my interpretation of some of the ways that this was described. And they're also, they have a plans to do some ASL interpretation proposed in this grant. But I didn't see any other language accessibility as a part of their their efforts. So overall, interesting work, but also not clearly for me aligned with the aims of this grant.
Thank you, Lee. Secondary, Richard?
Yeah, I have to agree with Lee on a lot of that. She kind of pinpointed. You know, it's a community theater that's doing good work. It just needs to broaden. You know, it's inclusivity, that area. It is responsive to the times of, you know, they have a production about school shootings, which is unfortunately relevant in Texas. So they have it's another theater group. That's another thing. We need more theater groups and we need venues. And that creates a lot of opportunities in that space, which we need. So I'm always excited to see, you know, more theater groups, but otherwise, that is basically what I have to add.
Okay, then, I invite any other respondents, panelists rather, to offer feedback. Go ahead, Emily. You're muted, yeah.
I mean, one of the first things I do is I look at the plays and who the playwrights are that the organization's producing and want to bring to different communities. And the play selections were not even reflective of what this grant is aligned to do. So as the organization moves forward and wants to get into this work, that's just, I mean, start with who's making the work. But that's just one thing that really stuck out to me.
Thank you for that guidance. Good note.
Comments from other panelists? Additional information that has not already been shared, or expanding maybe upon something that has been and given more detail? Seeing as there are no additional comments, if you would please, panelists, finalize your scores and let me know when you have done so. Vale, Lee and Sarah, Taylor and Emily, and Richard. All right, and that was our final application for the Elevate panel. We are at the end, and so we will stop the recording.